We're building a WRC replica Ford Focus for homegirl Sarah next door. And I don't know if you guys saw the old videos of me doing the interior, but I shot the whole thing with some white bed liner and paint matched the cage with some DTM urethane, and that came out sick. So we're gonna do the outside now. We've got a few things done on it already. The roof scoop, we measured and trimmed and got that all cut and placed in there right now just with some Clecos. I had the mad scientist go around and get these drip rail, the welded seams in there, all cleaned up and a little bit of dough on there to smooth them out, because Sarah and Charlie welded on the sunroof delete roof skin. We've got some fiberglass fenders up front that we're going to be working on today. And then later on down the road, we're going to be fitting the fiberglass, Kevlar fiberglass, whatever, front bumper. We got to figure out a way to make the rear bumper work with these giant barn find rusty ass over fender things that need to get, essentially we have to cut out big chunks of the quarter panel to make these raised arch quarter panels kind of become one, and then cut and weld and fit those in. So name of the game is just trying to make it a cool rally car on the inside and outside. So what we're gonna do today is show you guys kind of how some really badly made fiberglass aftermarket parts fit. We have never actually had any luck with aftermarket fiberglass parts. They generally never fit correctly, but these ones are particularly bad. So we're gonna go through the steps to try to get those to fit right and at least look kind of decent on the front end. It doesn't need to be perfect because it's just a race car, but we do need to get it better than that. So we already went ahead and fitted the driver's side fender because it wasn't too bad. So you can see on the gap here up against the door that it's a little bit on the tight side, and it's got some spots where it gets a little bit wonky and like a little bit too close to the door. And right now it does rub a little bit when you open the door up. So we've got everything else looking pretty good on it. It fits pretty nice up against the A-pillar, decent along the hood. The gap's a little bit wide in some spots. We're gonna do a little shaving to kind of just make it kind of more uniform. Maybe trim out a little bit here to just get it to fit up nice against the hood. But aside from that, the driver's side fender is pretty good. We just dial in this gap, dial in this gap. We're gonna call that one good. The situation on the passenger side, however, is that this fender was made incorrectly. So I measured from this body line over to the edge of the fender on the other side, and it's actually 6 millimeters wider on the other fender. So this one is 6 millimeters too shy on this gap here, and it hits up against the A-pillar really nasty. We've actually already shaved this quite a bit to try to get it to suck in up against the A-pillar better, because it's bulging out pretty significantly from the side of the door. And then we are going to have to work on the fitment up against the door, obviously, as well. So this is kind of a worst case scenario. This is gonna need a lot of work, and I'm realistically not the best with fiberglass, but I can get the job done. So I guess let's go ahead and just start cutting it to bits and see what happens. The first thing I wanna do is get this little lip shaved down to try to fix the fitment up against the A-pillar here, and then I want to get the fender mounted up against the door so that we have it all locked in here, and then we can move on to the really nasty gap up against the hood. We'll check the headlight gap in there somewhere as well before we do any potential cutting or manipulation of the fender up against the hood. That's already 10 times better than it was. Oh yeah. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and mark through the mounting holes on the back side of the fender so we can drill and we can just get this thing locked down. There's a tab here, there's a tab in the center in the wheel arch, and there's a mounting location on the pinch weld down on the underside. So I already know the gap up against the hood is ruined, so I'm gonna check the headlight next. We got the door fitting up good, so. I didn't take these off. I don't know where the hell they go. Oh my God, no way. There we go. This isn't terrible. So I think once we get mounted up here, it'll help hold this kind of up against the edge of the fender. We'll probably have to make a small little L bracket or something to go from this hole to the fender to just kind of hold it away from the headlight a little bit so it doesn't just sit there, and otherwise it's gonna make a nasty vibration noise. And I mean, we already knew that was trash, but I'm gonna lower the hood down. Whoa. Jeez. So that's even worse. Well, what's going on here though? The headlight's not sitting where it needs to. Oh, okay. And now close the hood. Okay, so actually, it doesn't fit up against the headlight at all. The headlight was just in the wrong spot. Now the headlight's kind of sitting where it should, and that looks like that. So this is actually worse than I thought it was. What I'm seeing is shave this a little bit because the tension up against this edge is what's stopping you can see, like the fender wants to sit here. So if I trim a little bit on the back side here, we could probably suck up this gap up against the headlight. What I'm thinking of doing is essentially adding that tab to the underside here to secure this section of the fender from kind of, being able to do this, right? And then taking and cutting all the way along here, through the center here, all the way up to the side, bringing this whole chunk over to meet the hood, bolting down the sides in here in the jamb to secure it, and then essentially adding glass in this gap, because that's the only way I really see it working. I cannot make a proper bracket to go from here to here because I don't know the final position of this part because the whole radiator support is cut off. So the whole front end just willy-nilly flops around everywhere right now. So I just need something to temporarily hold this. So we're going to use the master of all temporary fasteners to hold this in place, just for us to get an idea of what we need to do and then do some cutting and stuff. And it's literally just to hold this lip for the meantime until we make something more permanent.
Oh, I see what you gotta do.
Yeah.
So you just gotta add material in that crevasse.
Kind of.
Here.
If only it was like as easy as just cutting it and extending it, but I'm seeing that it's not going to be like that.
Because it's nice when it's like up where it needs to go.
No, it's not.
Except
I have to
there.
cut this because it sits too high.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So the whole thing is too high up against the edge of the hood, which means like you can
Is it like that
shove
on the
it
other
in
side?
there. Yeah. Like realistically though, the easiest thing would be to cut down in there and get rid of some of the
Or just the
height. So what I'm thinking is turn this into 3 pieces now. Trim some out of there. Mount the tabs, like actually thread them on and get them mounted.
What you didn't realize is I purposely did this because now you're honing in a new skill set that you didn't really have before.
No, you didn't do this on purpose.
And then I like
Sarah is omnipotent. She knows. She knew the fenders would be So we've essentially turned one fender into 4 pieces now because there was just some sections of this that were not going to give way enough by just pushing them and kind of bolting them down, right? So we made a relief cut along this body line here so that we could bring this piece up to the edge of the headlight to fit properly, and then also correct this gap and essentially just position it wherever we need it to go, right? But even with this in place, this tail section was sitting up like that. Way too weird. So we went ahead and trimmed this tail section off. We're gonna get this affixed first and get this all lined up, and then we're gonna trim that to fit back where it needs to go to line up properly on the edge there. So we're probably gonna have to take a little chunk out of here. And then we also need to dial in this piece, which goes into the jam and actually mounts the fender down. We were brainstorming a little bit, and the initial plan was to take this piece, find some ways to fix it. We were thinking aluminum tape and then kind of bridging it across from the backside, and then putting glass across the top and reinforcing it, flipping it over, grinding it all down, and then adding some more glass to the backside to create kind of a more structural piece. But then we're kind of getting to thinking that it might be easier to just go get some modeling clay or foam or something to fill this gap and then create a shape inside here, and then we can literally just overlay fresh glass on this whole section, where we can then go back and flip it over, add more glass, and then literally just attach this piece into the jam and we're done, as opposed to having to mold together 4 now separated pieces that are all going to be floating around like doing their own willy-nilly thing. And that way we can just make it exactly how we want. I think at this point we're going to have to cut away a little bit more of the fender, because where it's sitting right now in relation to the sweep of the hood is actually a little bit too high. So we're not going to wind up with like kind of a nice gradual shape going down to the edge. So more cut. I think I'm at a point where I'm happy with it now. I went ahead and shaped the clay a little bit lower than the surface of the fender and the surface of the hood. So when I lay the fiberglass over this, it's going to, build it up a little bit and get it up to that level where it needs to be. And if it's not, I'm going to be flipping this over anyway, and I'm going to be adding even more material onto the backside. So Essentially what we're trying to do is just get it kind of roughed in for the day, and then we're going to let it cure overnight, let the resin set up real good, and then hopefully tomorrow we can, you know, break it free, pop it off and everything, and get a little bit better idea of how to tackle the rest of it. Alright, we got the second coat of glass on here, and we definitely got plenty of build now. You can see this thing is looking pretty chunky and fat. So what I'm going to do now is take this guy with some 80 grit on it, and we're going to get a rough shape to the top of this fender. We'll probably try to finalize it with the DA, and then we're going to go ahead and mark where it lines up against the hood and the headlight here. Get everything popped off, and then we'll trim the edges out a little bit so we can start working on the backside and getting the tab inside the fender jamb squared away. I'm gonna go ahead and clean this stuff up. Got the fender off. I did a rough mark where I need to cut, so I'm gonna go ahead and get that thing trimmed up. We'll test fit it a little bit, and then probably start working on getting this jamb squared away so that we can do the finishing work on that and make it look pretty. So we got the basic shape of this all trimmed out. We got it fitting up against the headlight pretty good and up against the hood. So the next step is getting this little piece for the jamb secured onto the fender. So I went ahead and drilled some holes and cleat-coated it onto the car. And then I ground the fiberglass on the tab. I kind of tapered it off on both sides so it's all ground up with 36 grit. And then we put some of this aluminum tape to create a backing. And then on the inside here, I'm gonna go ahead and lay some glass to bridge the gap on the back side and get it attached to the fender, and then I can take it off and put a piece on this side and just get everything all formed in, and then we can reinforce the back of the fender, smooth all this out, get some glass and some kitty hair and stuff on here, and make this all looking nice and, you know, like a fender should, instead of all these little pits, and we got a little air pocket and stuff like that. So we'll get it all prettied up once we get the basic shape of this thing all squared away and all the pieces are attached to it. I got the seam in the fender jamb here all squared away with the adhesive and everything. And now the last step I'm gonna do is grind all this back here so I can lay a sheet of reinforcement, just fiberglass, to go across here and all the way into this jamb piece and kind of just make everything all one uniform chunk. We got all the jambs and gaps and everything all nice and trimmed up, so this is all fitting really nice up against the headlight and up against the hood. You've probably seen that we had a pretty good like air bubble that had formed in the fiberglass right here. So what I did was took a carbide burr and went ahead and kind of put a taper in it so it didn't have a real abrupt edge. I ground out all the loose fiberglass in there, and then we just put a little bit of glass in there, and then I put 2 extra layers of glass that I trimmed in the shape of the hole to kind of build it back up, and I'll file that in and get it all shaped in with the rest of the fender. As for everything else, I took some 80 grit and I feathered it into the gel coat down under here, and then I went ahead and just brushed a thin coat of resin over the top of everything. That was mostly just to fill in all the pinholes that it had, because it had a bunch all over the surface, and then also to kind of create a nice smooth transition between the glass and the gel coat that's already existing down here. So the next step is going to be getting this all shaped and getting like a nice kind of final form to it, and then I'm going to go ahead and do a skim of kitty hair over top of all this and use that to really dial in that body line and make everything fit and look, you know, have that nice finish and everything that a proper fender would have. Kitty hair all went really smooth. Just took one quick application, and then I went back over just a few little spots that were along this body line that kind of had some dimples or like some more weird spots. Got that all blocked out in 80 grit, and the last thing I did here is I just gave it a quick skim with some real nice creamy body filler just to fill in all the little pinholes and final gaps and everything, and I can, you know, sand this into a nice final shape for everything. That skim with the Bondo went really well. Everything is all blocked out real nice and smooth. I've got it 150 grit right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and just pop the fender off now. I'm gonna clean up all these little Bondo boogers and stuff that we got around the edges. And, you know, make sure the gap's still all dialed in. I might have to put a little bit of filler in the jam here just to smooth it out and make it look a little prettier. And then it's ready for primer. After that, I've got to cut the jam down on that side because the fender just sits a little bit high. Aside from that, we're pretty happy with how that fender sits, so I don't think we're gonna have to do this extensive a modification. And then after Charlie and Brandon get together and fabricate a mount for the front bumper, we can get the whole front end done.